Thank you very much, everyone. Please see it. So, we'll go on to possible information
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Anderson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Berry.
It's been a couple hours since you first talked to Mr. Vogt. And I guess when you had started your discussion with the jury earlier today and kind of walked through your analysis, you described it as all very simple. I'd like to take a little bit of time this afternoon to talk about that analysis and kind of get through some of the things that were kind of simple. Can we do that?
Sure.
Excellent. In determining, the first thing that we might start with is kind of making clear what you didn't do in this case. Okay? In determining the value of Gawker.com, you didn't factor in Gawker's actual financials into your analysis, right?
My valuation, in my opinion, does not factor in the historical financials of Gawker, no.
Okay. And you didn't factor in its actual revenue, did you?
No.
You didn't factor in its actual profit?
No.
Did you know that Gawker Media, across all 8 of its websites, when you did your analysis, did you know that it published 100,000 posts in 2012?
You're saying for all of the Gawker Media websites? I didn't look at all of the sites, so I don't know that, but if you say that, I will believe you on that.
Thank you. Were you aware that Gawker.com alone had published more than 10,000 posts in 2012?
I believe that number sounds about right.
According to, and some of this may plow ground that you went over this morning, but I just want to refresh everybody's recollection. According to your testimony earlier, the primary benefit to Gawker from posting the Hogan video was an increase in traffic, right?
It's an increase in traffic, and it's an increase in the recognition. Again, we could go back to that Google Trends graph, but it's an increase in the recognition of Gawker, the brand that drives the value, and the traffic that drives that value to the brand.
Mm-hmm. And the number of unique views for the Hogan post, I think you said earlier, was 5.3 million. That was up on these charts.
I believe 5.4, we're rounding up a little bit, between 5.3 and 5.4, yes.
Right, but you don't know whether Gawker actually monetized those views, whether 5.3, 5.4. You don't know whether it actually monetized those views.
I don't know if they did, and it doesn't matter for the approach and valuation we took whether or not they monetize those specific users. Again, it's about the future potential to generate revenue and earnings from that user base, from that increase in traffic. So, no, and it does not matter.
Okay, and we'll get to the second part of your answer there a little bit later. You don't know whether those views translated into actual revenue for Gawker, do you?
I do not.
You don't know whether the Hogan post had any advertising on it when you did your analysis, did you?
I do not believe it did, and again, the relevance of whether or not there was advertising on that page does not come into play when we look at, in the grander scheme of things, and the real goal of this was to drive more traffic to Gawker, because that increase in traffic, that increased user base, allows for future monetization.
Okay, and we'll get to some of that, but let's stick to the questions. You're not expressing any opinion on how much profit, if any, Gawker earned from the video, right?
I am not.
Your valuation doesn't measure how much revenue Gawker generated from the Hogan post, right?
It does not.
And your valuation doesn't show how much actual money went into the company's profits, or into their company's pockets, right?
No.
You're simply valuing what you believe a hypothetical buyer would pay in an arm's length deal to purchase the Gawker.com website, right?
It is the fair market value of Gawker.com, yes.
Right, but that's just a hypothetical value, a hypothetical buyer, a hypothetical investor, how they would value it. Right?
Hypothetical in the sense that it's the fair market value standard. I mean, this is a standard defined by the IRS. It's Revenue Ruling 5960. So it's a standard that, well, hypothetical, and I don't want to overemphasize hypothetical, but it is a standard that is used in nearly all reasonable valuation approaches.
Now, Gawker.com, as we've heard about while you've been here this week, is just one of Gawker Media's 8 websites, right?
Yes,
And you just valued that one Gawker.com website, isn't that right?
that is correct.
You didn't value Gawker Media, the company as a whole, right?
I did not.
So you didn't consider the value of Gizmodo or Deadspin or Jezebel or any of those other websites, right?
I did not.
And you valued just Gawker.com, just that one website, I think in those charts, to be somewhere between $92 million and $286 million in value as of April 2013, right?
Yes, that sounds right.
Do you know anybody who would pay $286 million for the Gawker.com website? Just the website.
I have not been asked to go out and shop the Gawker.com website. I mean, we do projects like that, but if I was asked to do that, I would go out and try to find someone. But I don't know off the top of my head because I wasn't asked to do that.
Right, so you don't know any real person who would pay $286 million or $92 million just for the website, do you?
I don't have a specific buyer that I have spoken with that says I will pay that.
All right. Would you advise somebody to buy the Gawker.com website for $286 million?
That is the fair market value of the website, yes.
Okay. And so you would tell them that's the fair price for Gawker.com would be $286 million on the outside, right? Somebody came to you and said, I want to buy Gawker.com's website. And you say, well, you can get it, but you're going to need to buy that website from $92 million to $286 million. That's what I'm telling you is the fair price, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I mean, at September 30th, 2013, we're not talking about today or the previous 2012 date, I assume.
Right, just in April 2013.
Sure, yes.
Okay, so if we went back in time, and essentially that's what you're telling the jury, right? That's the value of Gawker.com website. At that point, the fair price would be $92 million to $286 million.
That is correct.
Now, if you were advising somebody who was interested in buying the website, you wouldn't tell them to buy it without looking at its revenue, would you?
I would ask them to look at the monthly unique user traffic. I would ask them to see what is the future potential that you can generate in revenue and earnings from that traffic. Mm-hmm. And so there would be no, you may look at the financials, but it's not a necessity in valuing it.
If you could open up your, I just want to refresh your recollection about some of this. If you could open up that binder with your deposition transcript to page 165.
Okay. I'm there.
Okay, so on line 10, I asked you, would you advise a buyer without knowing what the revenue of Gawker was? And your answer, I'm sure you would look at revenue as we looked at revenue, right?
Right.
But you didn't look at revenue, did you?
We had some historical revenue data for Gawker.
But you didn't bake that into your analysis. You just told us that, right?
Yeah, that revenue figure that we looked at, it was not necessary for the valuation that we did. That's a completely different approach. We'd be then, and I don't want to go back over this again because I don't want to bore everybody, but if we're looking at the revenue and trying to do an income approach on that, that is going to significantly undervalue this website because the value is not from the revenue. The value is from the future potential that you can get from that traffic.
Let me ask you a slightly different question then. If you were advising somebody on buying this website, would you tell them to do it without looking at the website's profit?
Again, you would look at whatever information is available. You take it all into consideration.
Well, right, and one of those things would be profit. You'd want to tell the buyer what the profit of the website was, right?
Sure.
And when you worked at Wells Fargo and Bridge Bank, you dealt with business loans, didn't you?
Yes.
And I assume that those banks didn't make loans without looking at businesses' actual financials, did they?
But we're talking about two different things here because we're talking about a website versus an active business. I worked in the commercial banking industry, so this is businesses that have manufacturing facilities. It's a much different type of asset than a website.
Right. But when you worked in the commercial banking industry, to make a loan to those businesses, you would look at their financials, wouldn't you?
Yes.
You wanted to make sure that you understood the actual value of the company based on their revenues, profits, right?
And because for those type of companies, for more, I don't want to say dinosaur companies, but your traditional manufacturing companies or traditional companies that sell hard goods. An income approach is typically a useful approach. You also will use a market approach, but with a website, especially a content-based website, an income approach does not work. It's going to yield a value that is significantly lower than the true market value of that website.
Okay. But basically what you're saying here is that the jury should accept that the fair market value of Gawker has nothing to do with revenue and profits. Fair?
I am saying that in the future potential of the revenue and earnings that can be generated by a large user base, that is the measure by which you value a website, especially a content-based website like Gawker.
Are you aware that in October 2012, the website Gawker.com had less than $100,000 in revenue?
I may have seen that figure.
I want to talk to you about something else that you talked about with Mr. Vogt briefly. And I think you referred to this earlier, just now this afternoon. The premise of your opinion is that Gawker.com's average number of monthly unique users increased following the Hogan post, right?
It did, yes.
And your calculation was based on the fact that the Hogan post had 5.3 or 5.4 million unique views, right?
Correct.
You're aware that Mr. Belay is not suing based on the post that had those 5.3 million views, aren't you?
In terms of the legal aspects of this case, I'm not an attorney, so I don't get into that. But what I am aware of is that the title of the post says something along the lines of, and I don't have it in front of me, but
yeah, we saw it.
Watch.
But you were here.
It says watch.
Right. You were here when Mr. Houston stood on the stand and said we were never upset about the post. We were upset about the video. You remember that?
I do remember something along those lines. Yes.
Now, if the video received less views than the post, that changed your analysis, right?
No.
Could you look at your deposition again? Go back to page 306. And we had a bit of a discussion preceding this, but if you'd like to look at it, and I ultimately apologize to you if you look at line 12. I said, sorry, again, it's a better question because I garbled the one before. And I said, would your conclusion change if the number of unique views for the Hulk Hogan video was less? And your answer was, likely, it would change, yes. Do you remember that?
Which page and line again? I'm sorry.
306 on lines 12 through 15.
Yeah, I think there was also a discussion somewhere in there, and I'd have to...
Right, we went on, we talked about it, we talked about how you might do it, but ultimately said, you didn't do that analysis, did you?
Do what analysis?
On the views of the video.
My analysis was based on the traffic that was driven by Gawker posting the Hulk Hogan sex tape.
Right, but at your deposition you said your analysis would likely change if there were less views of the video, didn't you?
So what, and again, just context, because context is everything for valuation and for this, is we went through, I remember, a litany of questions, and you had asked me to do a fairly basic calculation where I said, all things being equal, sure, half of 5 million is 2.5 million, and
right.
so all else being equal, sure, that value would be half. But I think you're maybe putting words in my mouth, and I know you're not doing it on purpose, but that's not what I said in my deposition.
Well, take a moment and explain right now. I mean, you didn't value the views of the video, right?
No, I valued what Gawker benefited by posting the Hulk Hogan sex tape on their website and the amount of traffic that generated to Gawker.com. That's what I valued.
But it wasn't based on how many people actually looked at the video, was it?
No.
All right, so just sort of stepping back for a second to then go forward. The premise of your opinion is that Gawker.com's average number of monthly unique users increased following the Hogan post. We just talked about that, right?
That's correct.
And your opinion is that a portion of that increase is attributable to the Hogan post, right? That's the analysis you walked through.
That's correct.
And you concluded that the average monthly unique views of the post for the time that it appeared on Gawker.com was roughly 800,000, right?
Yeah,
Like
over 6.71 months, roughly 800,000 per month, yes.
Right, so that was my next question. So that's drawn over a 6-month period. You look from October 2012 through April 2013.
Almost 7 months, 6.5, 7 months, yes.
Your Honor, may I show, well, actually, why don't we just put it up, Tim? I believe this is Plaintiff's Exhibit 211. It's also Defendants Exhibit 120. So, Mr. Anderson, this is a document that you used in connection with your analysis, right?
Right.
This is the document that you used to actually find that number of unique views, correct?
Correct.
And then, Tim, if you could just zoom in and show, this is the one that shows it's roughly 5.3, 5.4 million. Right, so that's the number right there that you drew this from.
Correct.
All right, now if we can just look at the graph at the top of the page. That graph shows the distribution of when those views happened, right?
Right.
Most of those unique views happened in that first month of October, right?
That's correct.
So there was this initial bump in traffic, and then the views dropped like a rock there, right?
Dropped like a rock. They went
small
down.
ski
Yes,
slope.
yes.
Right, but it went down the mountain quite a bit.
It did go down.
And then it basically flatlines out. Tim, if you could just show all the way through April, it's just flatlined, right? There's no noticeable bump in the traffic.
And we went through this in my deposition. No noticeable bump. And the scaling, again, on this it's pretty tight. So you wouldn't notice if there was 10,000, let's say, because you're talking about 0 to 2.5 million and then 2.5 to 5. So it's going to be hard to see any fluctuations later on. But I'll agree with you, yes, the representation here is flat.
All right. According to your calculations, the Hogan Post accounted for roughly 28.5% of the increase in Gawker.com's average monthly unique users, right?
Correct.
And just to be clear, you're saying that this increase is average monthly unique users occurred in the 6 months following, right?
Correct.
You're saying that increase happened between the period from September 30th, 2012 through April 2013, right?
That's correct.
Tim, would you mind bringing up Defendants Exhibit 136? So, Mr. Anderson, just to kind of forewarn you, we're going to be showing you some of this Comcast data that you were talking about.
Sure.
Could you just explain again to the jury what is Comcast?
Yes, Quantcast is a site that tracks data on the number of users, monthly unique users. It's the source and the site that Gawker.com and all of the Gawker websites, as I understand, use to determine what their traffic numbers are, their monthly unique user traffic numbers are.
All right, so this is a chart that we looked at your deposition, together in your deposition, and it shows the number of unique U.S. viewers for Gawker.com for the period from October 2011 through September 2012, right?
Yes.
And that's the period, the 1-year period you were talking about before the Hogan Post, right?
That is correct.
And so that's what you use to calculate the baseline valuation of Gawker, right?
That's correct.
For the period from May through September, the number of unique users is increasing, right? You see that big slope?
It is.
In fact, on the chart, it's the largest aggregate increase on this chart, correct?
Largest aggregate increase just specifically on the data shown here?
Correct. In that 1-year period, the largest aggregate increase is between May and September.
It looks to be so, sure.
Okay. Well, why don't we do it this way? This all happened, just to be clear, before the Hogan Post, right?
Yes.
All right. I'm going to try and speed things along just a bit by giving you some paper as we go so that we don't throw up too much stuff, but I'll try and simplify it down for everybody who's watching. I'm going to hand you Defendants Exhibits 137 and 138.
Thank you.
And just, again, like a lot of this is ground we've covered in your deposition, so just try and move kind of quickly through this.
Sure.
Because I think, you're familiar with this stuff. You recall looking at these two exhibits in your deposition?
They looked very familiar, yes.
All right, so these documents that I've handed you are printouts from Quantcast that include a chart showing the number of unique users in the U.S. for Gawker.com from October 2011 through April 2013. Do you see that?
I do.
And so these charts show the monthly unique users for the year before the Hogan post, which is what we're looking at now, and then that 6-7 month period you talked about when the video actually appeared on Gawker.com, right?
Right.
What I'm going to do now is put up another Quantcast table that's clean that shows that whole period. So this will be Gawker's. Tim, this is the blank. There you go. All right, so this is a color version of what you're looking at. It doesn't have all the numbers and stuff on it, right?
Yeah.
And again, what this shows is the period from October 2011, which we've already looked at here, all the way to May and September over here, and then on down through April, right there. That's the whole period that we're talking
Right.
about. All right. We're going to just walk through this chart together, and I'm going to kind of take it piecemeal, but try and do it quickly. In Defendants Exhibit 137, there's a number on that page that shows the unique users in the U.S. for Gawker.com in May 2012. Do you see that?
I do.
All right. The number of unique users that month in the U.S. was roughly 7.5 million, right?
Yes.
All right. Would it be all right, just for continuity's sake, so everybody's clear, if we put that number on this table?
Sure.
Okay. Tim, would you mind just typing the 7.5 there? All right. So that's May, 7.5 million. You see that?
Yes.
All right. If you now turn to Defendants Exhibit 138, that document includes the number of unique users in the U.S. for Gawker.com in September 2012. You see that?
I do.
And the number of unique users that month was roughly 12.6 million, right?
Correct.
Do you mind if we put that number up on the chart?
Please.
Tim, would you mind? Okay, so in the 4 months, the number of unique users had jumped by more than 5 million people in the U.S., right?
They have.
And I think we went through this at your deposition. You told me that it was an increase of about 70% from, the 7.5 to 12.6.
About 70, yes.
Okay. And then Gawker published the Hogan post after this in October 4th, 2012, right?
That's correct.
And so just to be clear, before the Hogan post went up, there'd been this uptick of 5 million unique users, correct?
Right.
All right. Now I'd like to hand you a couple more of these documents. Try and keep my paper clear.
Thank you.
Now, what I've handed you, Mr. Anderson, is Defendants Exhibits 139, 140, and 141. I'm giving you the paper so that we don't have to keep throwing charts up and down here, but we'll walk through everything that's on there. Again, these are Quantcast printouts showing that same time period for the U.S. unique users for Gawker.com, right?
Yes.
And it's for that same period of October 2011 through April 2013, right? You see that?
That is correct.
Okay. You recall looking at these at your deposition, too?
I do.
So just to refresh where we are, May 2012, 7.5 million unique users. September 2012, 12.6 million, right?
Yes.
All right. So please look at Defendants Exhibit 139.
Okay.
There were roughly 14.2 million unique users in the U.S. for Gawker.com in October 2012, right?
That is correct.
Do you mind if we put that up on this chart?
Sure.
All right, so that was the month of the Hogan post, right?
Right.
Now please look at Defendants Exhibit 141, please. You have that in front of you?
I do.
That's the unique users for November 2012, right?
Right.
How many were there? How many unique users were there that month?
9.54 million.
All right, can we put that number up on the board? So that's a pretty big drop there from October to November, right?
Yes.
It's the biggest drop on this chart.
Yes.
So in the month after the Hogan post, the number of unique users dropped by over 4.5 million, right?
Yes.
Then you'll see there was a large increase between November and December, correct?
Correct.
Now, that increase wasn't attributable to the Hogan Post, was it?
The increase itself,
Yeah, between November and December.
I think the increase itself was possibly attributable to some other article that was posted.
Okay, yeah, because we just looked at that graph a little while ago that showed all the uniques were in October, right?
Right.
Now please look at Defendants Exhibit 140, please. This document shows the number of unique users in the U.S. for Gawker.com in April 2013. You see that?
I do.
That was the last month that the video appeared, the Hogan video appeared on Gawker's website, right?
That is correct.
In that month, there were roughly a little under 12.8 million unique users, right?
Correct.
So let's put that number on, please. And that was the last month that you looked at in your analysis, correct?
Yes.
So looking at this chart, before the Hogan Post and after the Hogan Post, or before the Hogan Post and then the month that it went down, those numbers are pretty close to identical, aren't they? You have, what, 12.6 and what, 12.7, 12.8?
Before and after, they're close.
Pretty
yes.
close to identical.
Pretty close.
Now, you can take that down, okay? You explained earlier, I'm just going to switch gears slightly here to talk about another part of your report and analysis. You talked earlier about the market approach, and I think this is what you were getting into before where I said we'll get to you. What you talked about, I think, was that in order to do the market approach, you need to look at comparable assets, right?
Correct.
I'd like to take a few minutes of time talking about the comps you used here.
Sure.
And to do that, I think it'd be helpful, Tim, if you could put up Defendants Exhibit 119, page 3. This is that exhibits to your report that we looked at earlier.
Okay.
And if you could just zoom in a bit on the comps, just the list there. We'll get to the numbers in a minute. If you could just start with the list of Bleacher Report and those. No, just the list of the actual names, I'm sorry. All the way over the left. Perfect. All right. So we're going to talk about some of these comps here. In the market approach, it's important to have comparables, right?
Of course.
It's like when you're buying your house, right? The bank looks at the value of similar houses to determine the value, right?
That's correct.
So for comps, you look at other houses that might be in the same neighborhood, right?
That could be one factor, absolutely.
Some neighborhoods are hot neighborhoods everybody wants to get into, right?
Yes.
Some neighborhoods not so desirable and people are moving out, right?
Right.
And then when you look at a specific neighborhood for comps, you look at houses that have same number of rooms, right? You want to buy a 4-bedroom house, you go for one with 4 rooms.
Sure.
You look at houses that are in the same condition. Is it new? Is it old? Is it deteriorating, right?
Right.
The point is that just to the extent possible, you want to make sure that you're comparing apples to apples, right?
Yes.
And that's basically what you have to do in this case, more or less. Compare apples to apples as best you can.
Yes, I compared apples to apples.
And to do that, and I think this is what you explained earlier, but just now this afternoon, but in more detail to Mr. Vogt, you did that by looking at companies that had content-based websites that generated a majority of their revenue through advertising, right?
Correct.
You did that because Gawker generates a majority of its revenue through advertising.
Correct.
But you don't know what kind of ads the comps use, do you?
What exactly do you mean by that?
You don't know what kind of advertisements these companies use on their websites, do you?
Like banner ads versus sidebar ads versus... No, I do not.
Right, or if there's product endorsements and sponsored links and those, you don't know what.
I do not know.
And you don't know what kind of ads Gawker.com uses, right?
Not specifically, no.
Websites have different target audiences. don't they?
That's fair to say.
So, just to pick a couple examples, ESPN has a different target audience than TMZ, which has a different audience than Oprah, right?
I think that's safe to say, yes.
And each of those sites has, while they both have content, they have different kinds of content, right?
Sure.
And then people go to those sites for different reasons. You go to ESPN to look for sports. You go to Oprah because you're interested in the public interest stories. TMZ for celebrities, right?
You go to those sites to get content, yes.
Right. And advertisers try to target their ads to specific audiences, don't they?
I would hope they do, yes.
Right. So a company that advertises on one website might not advertise on another website, right?
And the inverse, I'm sure, is true.
Exactly. But you wouldn't necessarily see the same advertising on ESPN that you would see on Oprah's website, for example.
That's correct.
Your analysis, and I think this is what you were saying earlier, assumes that all content-based websites have the same monetization potential, right?
That's correct.
And so you assume, just to kind of start to put this into layman's terms, you assume that Gawker.com has the same potential to monetize its users as each of the comps, right?
I assume that, and it's more than an assumption, it's the truth, that having a unique user base, a significant unique user base, allows you to generate revenues and earnings in the future depending on how you monetize that, how you decide to advertise. So the difference in advertising that we're talking about, Mr. Berry, whether it's banner ads or click ads or any of the different type of ads, those could be applied to a Gawker.com just as whatever Gawker.com uses could be applied to another website. And so just because Gawker may or may not be maximizing the amount of revenue they can generate through those ads does not mean that the traffic, the core measure of value, the whole reason it exists, as Mr. Denton says, it's, our measure of our success is how much traffic and how many users we have. So absolutely yes.
Right, and we'll talk about that quote in a minute. I'm hoping Friday afternoon we're going to try and finish on time here. But ultimately, I think you got to where I was asking. Your idea was that Gawker has the same potential to monetize users as each of those comps, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's look at those comps. The first one I'm going to talk about is the fifth one on there, grandparents.com. I'd like to show you the printout of the grandparents.com homepage, which has been marked as Defendants Exhibit 132. Now, on this web page at the top, you can see this is it prints out a little different than it looks on the web page, but this is a printout of the homepage. You see that grandparents.com is affiliated with the American Grandparents Association, right?
Correct.
And at the very top of the page, there's a button that says Join AGAs. You can join the American Grandparents Association right there, correct?
You can.
People can't join Gawker, can they?
I don't know if they can join Gawker.
Well, I mean, as far as you know, it's not a membership-based organization.
I don't believe they can, yeah.
All right, so scrolling through this on page 2, grandparents.com allows people to learn about Medicare, right?
Yes.
There's a section there about health and well-being, stuff about grandkids, right?
Yes.
If you go to the next page, there's stuff about, towards the end here, the Grandparents Community Forum, expert advice, and then at the end you can learn about grandparents' rights. Do you see that?
I see that.
So grandparents.com is a publicly traded company, isn't it?
It is.
People can buy and sell its stock, right?
They can.
It's actually sold as an over-the-counter stock.
Over-the-counter, correct.
And in common parlance, that means it's a penny stock.
That's true.
So does grandparents.com's stock price change based on a single post?
Based on a single post?
Yeah.
I think grandparents.com's stock price could change based on the number of traffic and the amount of traffic that goes to its site.
Right. So if they have a blockbuster post on grandparents, what to do with their grandkids, the stock price might suddenly soar?
If they had a provocative post that fit within the measure of their audience and it drove significant traffic and was able to help maintain traffic and get more users to go to that site and to build the brand grandparents.com, then I would say absolutely that post can have an increase in value for grandparents.com.
But that would be determinative on them getting more revenue, more profits that people would ultimately make more money from, right?
And again, that revenue and profits is something that has the potential to occur in the future based on having a large user base.
Okay. Why don't we talk about another one of those comps? Tim, if you could put back up that list of comps. I believe it was Defendants Exhibit 119.
And just the last thing on grandparents is that the user base, so we talked about this, is it's not only 55 plus. There's a significant amount of traffic and users that go to grandparents.com that are actually, in fact, the majority of traffic to grandparents.com is under 55. So, and so a lot of it is in the 18-year-old range. So it's not, I don't want to make it seem like this is just grandparents going to that site.
Right. Do you have anything that shows that?
We talked about this in my deposition.
Oh, right. I'm just asking, do you have any information that actually shows that?
I don't think I was allowed to produce anything new, right?
Okay. So let's go to talk about Yelp for a moment. That was another one of your comps, right? The last one on the page?
Yes.
Okay. Yelp, I think most people are probably familiar with, has reviews and information on shops and restaurants, right?
They do.
You can look at Yelp to find out when a business is open.
You can?
You can see where a business is located, right?
You can?
You're interested in going to a restaurant, you might be able to find the menu there.
I think some of them may, yes.
And you can see what other people think about these restaurants and businesses, right?
Correct.
I guess you told me you're familiar with Yelp's website.
Yes.
You sometimes use it in your personal life, don't you?
I have used Yelp.com, yes.
You go there when you're looking for a store or a restaurant to go to, right?
I go there when I'm looking for information.
And when you go to Yelp, you're possibly looking to spend money at the restaurant or store, aren't you?
I could potentially be spending money.
Yeah, that sounds like a pretty good place for a restaurant or store to advertise, doesn't it?
It could very well be a good place for them to advertise, yes.
Do you know Yelp is also publicly traded, right?
Yeah.
Do you know if its stock price changes based on any single posts?
Again, their stock price could change significantly based on the amount of traffic that goes to their site. So if they had a single post that was provocative, that had some draw to their user base and beyond to bring in new traffic, sure, it could have a significant impact on the value of their site.
Are you aware of any post on Yelp's site that has changed the value of its stock?
I haven't studied all of the posts on Yelp sites to do that, so unfortunately I can't answer that question.
Okay. Overall, you use these six as different companies as comps, right?
I do.
And I think, kind of rewinding a bit to this morning, you said that you looked at publicly available valuations for each of these six, right?
I did.
We just talked about two of those comps, grandparents.com and Yelp, that are publicly traded stocks. Anybody could look up their stock price at any point, right?
Correct.
And you could go, they have SEC filings, you can find out all sorts of financial data, right?
Absolutely.
Now, these other four companies, Bleacher Report, Buzzfeed, Huffington Post, and Aussie, those are not publicly traded, right?
Correct.
And so what you did is, and I think you explained this briefly to Mr. Vogt, is you looked at valuations that were done in connection with private valuations, private transactions, right?
Sure, it's still a market-based valuation. So anytime a private equity firm, an investment bank wants to invest in one of these websites, oftentimes, if it's a large enough transaction and depending on who the parties are involved in the transaction, they will actually disclose publicly what the ultimate valuation of the company was at the time that an investment or purchase was made of that company or website. And so, yes, these are publicly available valuations that we used here.
No, and I appreciate that because that's exactly where I was going next. These private transactions were things like an investment of capital, a loan, one of the companies was sold, maybe two of them was sold, right? That's the kind of thing you're talking about.
Correct.
You were not involved in any of those transactions, were you?
I was not.
You've never seen any of the documents involved in any of those transactions, have you?
I have not.
You don't know how any of the valuations for any of those four companies were performed, do you?
How they determine the ultimate value that they were going to pay for those? That information is not public. I have not seen it, no.
Right, so you haven't looked at any documents to see how these valuations, Tim, why don't you show the whole valuations there on that chart? Yeah. Perfect. So you don't know how any of those you haven't seen any documents to see how these valuations were actually determined, have you?
I haven't, and that wasn't necessary for the valuation. For the conclusion that we were coming to on this slide, that was how they did that valuation.
Right.
It did not apply, and no, I did not look at those.
You don't know whether any of these valuations were reached by assessing average monthly unique users, do you?
I do not know that.
You don't know whether the valuations were determined by the income approach, do you?
I don't know that.
And you haven't looked at any of these 4 companies' balance sheets or income statements, have you?
I have not.
You don't know what their revenues and their profits were at the time of those valuations, do you?
I do. I may have looked at some of the revenues and profits, but that has no bearing on my analysis or ultimate conclusion.
But you did look at the revenues or profits?
I may have seen some of the revenues through Capital IQ, the source we use to get this information.
But do you remember what any of them were?
I do not.
But at bottom, the revenues and profits, you don't know what they were at the time of the valuation or how they factored into the valuation.
I do not.
And you don't know how the revenues and profits of those 4 comps compared to Gawker.com, do you?
I do not.
Now, to kind of walk through what you explained a little bit before to kind of put it into context, for each of these 4 companies, you looked at the average number of unique users for a 12-month period before these private valuations, right?
Correct.
And again, you believe, I think this is what you've said several times now, is that you chose unique users as the benchmark because you believe it's directly related to those companies' values, right?
Absolutely.
In your view, and I think you've gone on about this, having a collection of users drives potential future monetization, right?
That is absolutely true.
And so in your analyses, these companies have the potential, and I think you were talking about Gawker, they have the potential to convert their users into dollars later on. I was trying to get there earlier, use monetization, but you're talking about dollars, right?
Dollars, yeah, and I think we said this in my demo. Dollars, any form of currency, any form of value they're trying to get from these monthly unique users.
And they're trying to do that. The potential here is for future to generate that revenue, that money, right?
Correct.
And so for each of these 4 comps, these private valuation comps that you used with those private transactions, the assumption is that the purchaser or investor is expecting that company to grow and earn additional revenue and profits in the future, right?
Yeah, the purpose of any investment is to eventually get to a point where the company is figured out how to specifically monetize their user base. I mean, Facebook had the same issue. Twitter, a lot of the big websites we all know, I mean, what they had was a high user base, a lot of unique traffic. They didn't necessarily have the revenues or profits that associated with those high valuations, and the reason for that, and I think we've already talked about this, but for the ladies and gentlemen, is because the point is that you have that potential in the future to adjust how it is you monetize those users, and that's why, yes, you have to be forward-looking.
Okay. Then you're kind of reading my mind on where we're going here. The investor would be willing to pay more for a growing company, right?
I think that's safe to say.
They'd prefer growing traffic to traffic that's flat, right?
Yes.
To put it in the context that we started with apples to apples, in a housing market, you prefer to buy into a hot market, right? I mean, like the price is going up in a hot neighborhood, right?
Well, it would depend on the timing if you're buying. Maybe you'd prefer to buy in a market that's going down, assuming you can get it at a good price and then sell later at a higher price. But
the prices are rising, though, in markets that are in neighborhoods that are hot, right?
Assuming they're going to rise forever, then yeah, you would want to buy in that.
Right, but I guess, sorry, my question was awful. It was really bad. What I meant to ask was that the prices are rising. Prices are going to be higher in a hot neighborhood than one of these dilapidated neighborhoods where nobody wants to go. You're going to pay a premium to get into a hot neighborhood.
All else being equal, yes.
All right. Let's talk about 3 of these comps. The first one I'd like to talk about is this Bleacher Report. Tim, if you could just zoom in on the Bleacher Report line. So that Bleacher Report, the valuation that you used, and you can kind of see it at the end there, was based on a transaction that occurred in August 2012, right?
That's correct.
And at that point, I believe that the number of unique users for Bleacher Report in that 12-month period preceding it that you used was roughly 12.6 million. You see that?
25.6 million monthly unique users.
Did I say that?
I think you said 12.6. But
oh, sorry.
25.6,
25.6 million users.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to, again, try and expedite things here by just giving you some paper as we go. So what I've given you is more Quantcast data. And what this is are two Quantcast reports that show monthly unique user data for Bleacher Report for that 12-month period that preceded the transaction. You see that?
It's a little hard to make out the dates, but this is going through, and I'm looking at 125. So I assume this goes from, is this November?
July 2012, it has the number. We'll walk through it together.
Okay.
You looked at these in the deposition. We can.
I'm just talking about the entire time period here.
Yeah, I'll represent to you that this is the 12-month period that you looked at.
Okay.
We talked about it at the
Okay,
deposition.
sure.
I'm sure Mr. Vogt, correct me if I'm wrong. So if you could just look at 124 first.
Okay.
Tim, would you mind putting up Defendants Exhibit 124? So everybody can see what we're talking about. There you are. All right, so this is the chart that's on Defendants Exhibit 124. And that shows the one-year period prior to the transaction. You see what I'm talking about?
I do.
On there, according to Quantcast, Bleacher Report had roughly 12.1 million unique users in August 2011. Do you see that?
I do.
All right, now look at Defendants Exhibit 125. That was the other piece I gave you?
Yep.
All right, so that month, according to Quantcast, Bleacher Report in July 2012 had over 25 million unique users in the U.S. Do you see that?
I do.
Do you mind if we note that on the chart?
Sure.
So in the 12-month period that before the valuation, the average number of unique visitors at Bleacher Report more than doubled, right?
About doubled, yes.
Let's talk about another of these comps. Go to Buzzfeed. Going back to your original table, the Buzzfeed valuation occurred based on a transaction that happened in August 2014, right?
Correct.
And according to your chart, the average number of unique users for Buzzfeed for that prior 12-month period was roughly 136 million.
That's
right?
correct.
So I'm going to hand you a couple more documents. All right. These documents show the monthly unique user data for Buzzfeed for that 12-month period, right?
Yes.
So if we could, can put up Defendants Exhibit 127. If you would, Mr. Anderson, if you look at Defendants 127, according to Quantcast, Buzzfeed had almost 84 million unique users in August 2013, right?
Correct.
That's what that shows right there?
That's what it shows.
All right, now if you turn to Defendants Exhibit 128, according to Quantcast, Buzzfeed had almost 159 million unique users in July 2014. Do you see that?
That's correct.
Can we put that number up there?
Sure.
So in the 12-month period before Buzzfeed's valuation, the average number of unique visitors to its website almost doubled, right?
Almost, yes.
I'll represent to you. It's about 85%.
I'll believe you.
Okay. Let's talk about one last one now. Let's talk about Ozzy. All right. So for Ozzy, that was at the time you selected Ozzy, it was basically a startup company, right?
It was in early stage, yes.
Right. It started up sometime in the prior year.
Correct.
And in your analysis, you didn't factor in how long companies had been in existence, right?
I looked at when the websites first came out, I looked at that, but it did not drive any of the change or of any of my assumptions that I've made in my analysis, no.
So in this, it didn't make any difference that Ozzy had been around for less than a year, and at this point, Gawker had been around for a decade.
It did not.
And for Ozzy, you looked at a valuation from March 2014, right?
That's correct.
And for Ozzy, it was a little bit of an unusual case. You only used 1 month of average unique user data, right?
That was all that was available, yes.
Right. And so the month you used was October 2014,
That's correct.
And that month, Ozzy had a little bit more than 5 million unique users.
Correct.
All right. I'm going to give you one last one of these documents, which is Defendants Exhibit 130.
Okay.
Tim, if you would put up page 2 of Defendants Exhibit 130. All right, so what this is a Quantcast report that shows monthly unique user data for Ozzy that you used in connection with your expert report, right? All right, on the chart we just talked about, in October 2014, Ozzy had roughly 5 million unique users. That's what you just said?
That's correct.
Tim, would you mind putting that up on the chart? Then, by the end of December 2014, Ozzy had roughly 9 million unique users, right? That's
approximately, yes.
Yeah. Can we note that on the chart?
What's that?
Do you mind if we note that on the chart?
Yeah, go for it.
So Ozzy's number of unique users almost doubled in 3 months, right?
Right.
In 3 months, the number of unique users jumped, and I'll just tell you, it's about 80%.
Okay.
So, Tim, if we could, can we put up like all 3 of these next to each other and throw up also the Gawker unique users from October 2012, yes, through April 2013 we looked at before. So do you see what that is? That's the unique users for each of those 3 comps that we used, and then the slice from Gawker from the period when the Hogan post went up to the time that the video came down. Do you see that?
I do.
Mr. Anderson, the Gawker chart doesn't show the same kind of growth in unique users we saw for Bleacher Report before its valuation, does it?
It does not.
Bleacher Report grew at 100%, right? That's what we talked about before, almost doubled?
Right.
Or more than doubled. The Gawker chart doesn't show the same kind of growth we saw for Buzzfeed before its valuation, does it?
It does not.
For Buzzfeed, we saw 85% or so growth?
Correct.
Put that up. Gawker chart doesn't show the same kind of growth we saw following the valuation of Ozzy, does it?
It does not.
For Ozzy, we said it was almost 80%.
Right.
For Gawker, unlike each of those websites, the number of unique users from the time that Gawker posted the Hogan post to the end actually dropped, didn't it?
It did.
And it had a pretty big drop. It went from 14.2 million down to about 12.8 million, right?
That's correct.
That's a drop, and again, I just represent you, it's about 10%.
Sure.
Now, I'd like to kind of wind up at the spot. You had mentioned Mr. Denton's quote, and I told you we'd come back to it. So I want to get us there. Sorry. There's two quotes, actually, that you used from Mr. Denton. One was this quote that Mr. Bud put up on the board earlier. It talks about the potential growth.
Sure.
Just read that. Oh, yeah, I can read that. Sorry. So this is talking about U.S. monthly uniques. And he says it represents a measure of each site's domestic audience. This is the figure that journalists cite when judging a site's competitive position. It's also the metric by which advertisers decide which sites they will shower with dollars. Finally, a site with plenty of genuine uniques is one that has good growth prospects. Each of those first-time visitors is a potential contact, right?
Correct.
Mr. Denton said that.
He did.
And that's what you talked about earlier with Mr. Vogt. We've seen this a couple times during the trial.
We have.
Okay. That quote was from January 4th, 2010, right?
Right.
Mr. Denton wasn't talking about the Hogan Post when he made that quote, was he?
I don't know how he could have been.
Right. I mean, he made it 2.5 years before the Hogan Post.
I think this is a general direction in which they're trying to take the website.
Right. I don't mean to sound blunt by this question, but you're not an expert in the advertising business, are you?
No, not.
You've never worked in the website advertising business, have you?
Not advertising, no.
And you've never gone to an advertiser to try and persuade somebody to advertise on a website, have you?
No.
You don't know how Gawker deals with its advertisers, do you?
I do not.
Now, kind of go back to the very beginning of this, when you explained that the value of Gawker.com increased as a result of the increase in monthly unique user traffic.
Right. And
you concluded on one of these charts we saw that the average monthly unique views of the Hogan Post was 798,821, right?
Correct.
I'm going to take this down to the going on. So you calculated the number, that average of monthly unique views, right? That 800,000, 798,000 number. You calculated that by dividing the number of unique views of the Hogan Post by this 6+ month period where the video appeared on the website, right?
Correct.
And I think you went through the math before with the jury and showed that those unique views accounted for roughly 28.5% of the increase in Gawker.com's average monthly unique users, right?
Correct.
In your analysis, you're equating unique page views to the Hogan Post to unique users to Gawker.com, right?
I am.
Okay. I want to explain for a minute, and I think you did a little bit of this, but I want to do it a little bit more detail. The unique user means and what a unique page view means.
Sure.
Okay? Just to simplify things down to the bare elements at this point. A monthly unique user is a single user that visits a website one or more times in a month, right?
That's correct.
So if a person goes to a website just once in a month, that's one unique user, right?
That's correct.
And if that same person goes to the same website 10 times in one 1 month period, there's still just one monthly unique user.
That is correct.
So to start to put it in slightly more concrete terms, if in a single month somebody goes to 3 articles, Article A, Article B, Article C, they're counted as one monthly unique user. Let's say Gawker.com. They go to those 3, one monthly unique user.
Correct.
Right? For Article A, that's one unique page view, right?
Right.
Article B, one unique page view.
Yes.
And Article C, one unique page view.
Yes.
Right? But that person still remains just one unique user for Gawker.com as a whole, right?
On a monthly basis, yes.
Correct. All right, I'm going to put up a demonstrative that I'm kind of a visual person. The words,
Please.
especially with this technical stuff,
Please.
a little confusing. So, Tim, if you could put up the demonstrative, perfect. So this is our unique user. We'll call her Jane.
Okay.
Jane goes to Gawker and in the beginning of the month reads Article A. Do you see that?
I do.
So at that point, she becomes one unique user, right?
Correct.
Then she goes to Article B, right? She's still one unique user. We just talked about that.
Yes.
Then she goes to Article C, still one unique user, right?
Correct.
Now, if we could put up the page views, unique page views for Article A, she's one.
Right.
Article B now has a unique page view. Article C has one unique page view.
Right.
Do you see that? We now have a second unique user. Oh, sorry, there's 3 unique page views in total, right?
Right.
So she's one user, 3 unique page views, one for each of the 3 articles that she read.
Correct.
Now put up a second user. Call her Joan. Joan shows up, she reads Article A, she becomes a unique user that month, right?
Right.
She goes on, she reads another article, Article B, still just one unique user, right?
That's right.
But here, we now have 2 unique page views for Article A and 2 unique page views for Article B. Do you see that?
I do.
All right, we just want to make sure we're still on the same page. But
Yeah.
there's 5 total unique page views, right?
That's correct.
Now, just to kind of maybe start to beat a dead horse here, but to bring it to completion, we'll add one more person. That man, John, goes to Article A. One more unique user, we have 3, right?
Correct.
He then goes to Article B. Oh, sorry, that adds 1 unique page view to Article A. This Article B, still 3 unique users, but we now have 3 unique page views on Article B.
Sure.
He then goes to Article C, still 3 unique users. Article C now has 2 unique page views.
Right.
The first I did. That results in a total of 8 unique page views, right?
Yes.
Okay. So the total number of unique page views exceeds the number of unique users, right?
In this example, absolutely.
Now, making it slightly more concrete than the example, well, the example's fairly concrete, bring it back to what we're talking about.
Sure.
The total number of unique views for items posted on Gawker.com far exceed the total number of unique users, right?
That is correct.
But in your analysis, you're assuming that unique users of Gawker.com as a whole are the same as unique views of a single post, right?
For the Hulk Hogan sex tape post?
Correct.
Yes.
Okay. You don't know how many unique views of the Hogan post were unique users of Gawker.com for the month of October 2012, do you?
I don't. I asked for that. Wasn't available.
Right. Let's do look at what was available. If you could pull up, Tim, Defendants Exhibit 120 and go to page 2. All right, so this is a chart that we looked at in your deposition as well. I apologize, at the time the copy I had was pretty blurry. We now have a cleaner copy.
This is a better copy. Thank you.
Exactly. The first row in the second column, what this chart shows is the top stories on Gawker.com for 2012, right?
Right.
All right. The first row in the second column is titled Unique Page Views. Do you see that?
I do.
And that shows the total number of page views in that first box there on that first row, the total number of unique page views for all posts on Gawker.com in 2012. Do you see that?
I do.
It says there that there were over 687 million unique page views in 2012. You see that?
I do see that.
Now, if you go down the chart a little ways to where it identifies the Hogan post, all right, so it's number 3 on this. I think we looked at this a little bit in testimony the other day. There, it shows that there were roughly 4.8, can you keep that up? Can you all see where we're at? Right here. All right, sorry. Can you blow it up anymore? Hey, why don't you just blow up this number here? This is the Hogan post, right, on line 3.
Yeah.
And over there, in this column right here, That shows that 4,878,002, that's the number of unique views of the Hogan post in 2012, right?
Yes.
That's what this is showing.
Yes.
So the Hogan post in 2012 accounted for less than 0.7% of the unique views that Gawker had in 2012, right?
Yes.
But according to your analysis, on a forward-looking basis, it accounted for 28.5% of the growth in average monthly unique users.
That is correct.
But you don't know whether people who are unique viewers of the Hogan post had visited Gawker before, right?
We asked for that data. It was not available or it was not provided to us. You're right.
Right. You just don't know whether those unique views of Hogan were people who had been viewers of Gawker before, right?
I don't. But what I do know is that, as Mr. Denton himself says, is that some page views are worth more than others. And those page views that are worth more than others are those provocative stories, I think, the flames that everyone so much, wants to get.
Right.
And it's those views that have the potential to go viral, the potential to get on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and on TV. Those page views, those pages are the one that drive value. They're the ones that increase the exposure of the Gawker brand, and they're the ones that keep people coming back to Gawker.
I appreciate that, Mr. Anderson. And Mr. Vogel will come up and question you in just a second, and you can go through all of that. But I want to go back to the question that I'd actually asked you.
Sure.
And we'll wind up right where you're talking.
Okay.
You don't know whether the unique viewers for the Hogan post had visited Gawker before, correct?
I don't know.
And you don't know if any of those people who went to the Hogan post were first-time users of Gawker.com, do you?
I don't know if they were first-time users, and I think you're now referring to this.
No, it's just a simple question. You don't know if any of the people who went to the Hogan post were first-time users of Gawker.com, right?
I don't know if they were first-time users of Gawker.com.
They could have been people who visited Gawker.com before, right?
They could have been people that visited Gawker.com a year or two ago and never came back. So not only is it first-time users, but it's maintaining users. It's important with these type of posts.
Well, that's a fair point. They could have showed up in 2011, could have shown up in January 2012, February 2012, March 2012. You don't know, right?
We did not have that data, no.
Right. So you don't know if people were there on October 3rd, 2012, do you?
I don't have that data, no.
Right. And
I don't know.
Right. People who came to the Hogan post could have visited dozens of posts on Gawker the days before, right?
They could have.
But you're counting each one of those unique views of the Hogan post as a unique user for Gawker.com as a whole, right?
Yes, and I hate to repeat myself, but yes, I won't repeat myself.
Right. And you don't know if that's true or not, do you?
If what's true or not.
If each of those views was a unique user. You don't know if each unique page view of the Hogan post reflected a unique user to Gawker.com that month, do you?
I don't have the data. It was not provided. But based on everything that has been presented, everything I reviewed, every indication is that these views, the unique views to the Hulk Hogan sex page, are just as valuable as a monthly unique user with which I based my analysis on.
Right. More importantly, to Mr. Denton's quote that you wanted to talk about a minute ago, you don't know if any of those unique users came back to Gawker.com, do you?
I again asked for all of that data, and I have not been provided it, so I do not know. You are correct.
Tim, can you put back up on the screen the period that shows the whole trend? There we go. But we do know that from October 2012 to November 2012, there was a tremendous drop in users, right?
And I think we would also agree that had the Hulk sex tape not been posted on Gawker.com, that drop you see after October of 2012 could have been significantly worse.
Right. What are you basing that on?
I'm basing it on the fact that, as Mr. Denton says, these stories Okay? The stories, the provocative, celebrity, sex tape stories, those drive traffic, those drive value, those get new readers, but they also help to maintain readers.
Right. I guess my question, maybe I should have asked it a little bit more finely. We've gone through a lot of data this afternoon. We went through a lot of data this morning. What data are you basing that on? All I see is a drop. What do you see?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. There's a drop. There's no question about that. But I'm saying the question you're asking me, I'm saying it's just as likely that it would have dropped even more significantly had they not had the Hulk Hogan sex tape posted on their website.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Thank you.